What is up, everybody? We're here today with King's Court. Coming off fresh of our Season 5 draft, today we're going to be going over some of the power rankings, initial power rankings, a lot can change, of the GENGAR division. Joining me today is Vaughn. Say hello.
Yo, what's up, everyone? It's me, Vaughn, resident crash outer of Clefable Division, and as someone who's never won a chip, that qualifies me to judge everyone's rosters. So, Cards and I are going to go through them today and give some takes. Now, before we begin, just note this is only the rosters as they were at the start of the dock on November 26th. So these things might have slightly changed by the time you see this video, but the core suggestions will probably remain the same. We might suggest a couple specific picks you could pick up, but generally to be more discussing potential cohesion or other things that make a good team. So before we start, Cards, what are some of the things you look at when you're reviewing drafts or rosters in a Pokemon League?
Well, obviously the first thing that catches most people's eyes is going to be that Monarch, that high tier Mon. How well do you build around the strengths of that? Obviously, there's going to be a few key things you want to look for. Some certain immunities, like ground immunities. You're probably going to want to get a pretty good form of hazard removal and have some pretty good hazards yourself. Just general things like that when you're looking at these baseline reviews for teams.
Hey, sounds like a plan. Let's get to our first team that we're going to discuss then without further ado.
Jumping right into it, unfortunately, someone has to be first up on the list, and today that is going to be Dragon Knight's Destroyers. Pretty good idea, I think, with Annihilate plus Gliscor. Having that maybe one of the best spin blockers in the game for that solid hazard core, but I think a little bit past there, we start to see some issues pop up. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yes. I definitely agree with the fact that like you want to pair hazards with Annihilate, but from what I've seen a lot of the times, an Annihilate's best fit for a team, it never feels like a real round one pick because he's best suited to be played off of other offensive bonds. His ghost typing stands out for sure, but when I see Annihilate really find success, it's where it's paired with other fast or hard hitting mons. He's really good at taking chip hits and building up the pressure from Rage Fist, but it feels like his best set is the Scarf set, and that's the and there's a reason for that. And I want to also point out that speaking of Scarf, our speed tiers are quite atrocious.
Yeah, not
When
great.
you look at the team cards, you've got two Mons that are 100 above speed, and it's a Thunderous, not Therian, if I'm not mistaken, which I
Yeah.
find the weaker of the forms, and then also a Raichu, a Lola, which I think is a definite weak point of the team.
Yeah, I mean, really, you're going to have to be relying a lot on Scarf. You're going to have to be running Booster Iron Crown a lot, which, again, kind of holds it back from a lot of different sets. And you're all, like, obviously you have that Raichu, but there's no electric terrain. I don't know. Also, this is going to sound bad coming from me of all people, but I just don't see the vision with the triple Psychic type here. I mean, the Psychic terrain is cute, especially with Iron Crown, but it just seems to me like you're kind of stacking some weaknesses. I will say, though, you do have one of the best knockoff switches in the game with Gliscor. So, you know, not all bad. And you have some normal types in Garganacl for those ghost types. So, I mean, there's definitely some workarounds for it.
Yeah, things I would suggest before we move on to our next team is one, we're gonna need some hazard removal. Having no spinner or no defogger is, I think, unacceptable. You can still play aggressively. You don't necessarily always need a remover in every week to week, but this, I don't think I would ever consider a team able to win a chip or even make it far without some kind of hazard removal because you're just gating yourself to boots on a lot of things, and you have multiple mons that don't or realistically can't run boots, which feels pretty bad. The other suggestion I would make is you need to 100% fix your speed tiers, which means getting some faster guys and more varied guys. I think that your three top tiers don't have a lot of offensive synergy. Like, I don't think anyone on your team makes progress to win. I think Garganackle is super one-dimensional. I don't think Volcanion like hits hard enough, and none of your guys hit too hard, with the exception of if you're clicking stab on Iron Crown. So I would really suggest probably dropping one, if not both, of your Dukes. If you like one more than the other, drop just one, but probably start with Iron Crown. Pick up something that's going to hit harder and move faster. And then if you take that advice, make sure you draft a fairy answer somewhere down the line, because then you'll be losing your steel type. I just think this team is a little too one-dimensional, and I don't really see any of the synergy between the Mons, so that'd be something I would consider. And with that, I think I'm down to just move on to the next one.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Up next, we have the Gym Leader Rejects, with a rocky team, to say the least. 4 of those guys coming in here. Which,
the best typing.
The best type in the world. You know, I don't really see the vision with the 4 rock types. I'll be honest. I'm not exactly an Iron Boulder believer, but on some positives for this team, I do think there are just some straight up great mons on this team. Goldango, I'm a big Goldango believer. Iron Thorns is one of the best sweepers in its tier, and Overpawn and Hippowdon. I know this is gonna sound biased, but I used them to great success last season, so those two work really well together. So there are some pretty good strengths on this team. What are your thoughts on it?
So I see that in the end of the draft, they kind of try to pick up some hazards to pair with Goldango. I do feel a little discouraged with the fact that while Goldango is a good mod, I don't naturally see any of its partners in crime with it that are so notorious for it. You do have multiple mods. I find it's important that every team have more than one stealth rocker. I really believe in that. I think it's pretty important. I think it frees up move slots for your stealth rockers, and you always really want to have the option. So you do have that, which I believe in. But once I look past that, I see a pretty offensively flawed team. I think that... Is this the Cornerstone Ogerpon?
Yeah, this is the rock type.
Okay. Yeah, so while you have rocks on a lot of things, and also that one still gets spikes, I'm concerned that all of your mons are mons that I can click Earthquake on and they die. That make any offensive progress. And I understand that you have Terra types, but that doesn't really count. And I think that your top 3 picks all being mons that I can click a ground move on and smile is a little scary. Iron Boulder is cool, but I've never really been a big believer of him able to find success. And your defensive mons are very bulky, don't get it wrong. You have a Mandibuzz and a Hippowdon. But as someone who's used Mandibuzz in King's Court, I got top 3 on a team using Mandibuzz, and I've seen Hippowdon used in Hereby Cards. They don't do much.
No,
they kind of just
sit there. And sometimes that's all you need, but on this team, it kind of feels like you need a little more from those slots. I'll be honest.
I agree. And the Kindred, maybe it's a mon that you like. I don't really see what it does. I understand that you need a special attacker, but I don't really believe in it. And I don't also believe in the Levani. I understand why it's there with sticky webs, but I don't know if I necessarily enjoy it. I would probably suggest reimagining how your offensive type profiling looks, because it looks a little wonky. And then also, I'm a little nervous about if you're going up against a team with solid special attackers. I'm a little concerned about how that's going to look, because I would feel pressured in the team builder to probably make your Goldango a little specially defensive, because I would be really nervous about, with a combination of your typing and the mons you've picked, like if you're going against strong like breakers, like special attackers, I don't really know how well your team would actually be able to handle that. But any thoughts on what you might suggest to them, Cards?
The Kingdra is definitely the first thing I'd look at. I mean, I understand you have to have a water switch in somewhere, but it's just not really gonna be able to like fulfill that role very well. Gets hit by every hazard, worn down easily, doesn't take hits particularly well. I also, it's tough to say get rid of Iron Boulder, because that is your best speed tier by far, but I think on this team it's just too much of a defensive liability. But I think it's almost there. But yeah, cleaning up some of these spots like this Kingdra and this Boulder and this Leavanny could go a long way with this team. Because again, like I said at the start, I do believe in a lot of the individual pieces here. But I think that just about concludes our thoughts on this team. So let's move on to the next one. Number 11, the Mesmerizing Mudkips. Pulling up here with a Double Dragon core. And a lot of, I will say, a lot of guys on this team have some high stats, you know? A lot of pseudo legendaries, that Tyranitar. And if nothing else, this team hits hard. So that's how you
I
win the
just
game.
want to say,
You know?
it just feels like this guy drafted a sand team and doesn't know Sandvale is banned. I see when I
Yeah.
go to this team, I see 5 Mons with sand, like Garchomp, Gastrodon, even Diglett. Like they have sand abilities or sand adjacent abilities, but Sandvale is banned. And also, funny enough, so is Arena Trap. So like we're just trying to make points fit
Yeah.
with that Mon.
When I'm looking at like the Squires here with Hatcham and Diglett, and I go, wow,
awful. I'm sorry.
his
I'm
top
sorry.
tiers must be really good if his bottom two are Hatcham and Diglett. And then I look up and I'm just not seeing it.
Yeah, I feel very concerned about your bottom half of the squad is not going to pull its weight. Your only spinner being him on top is really nerve-wracking for me because you have Mons that do not want to wear boots, especially if you've got something like Arcanine around who benefits from a choice item a lot, or an Archaludon who in your team is probably going to want either a Soul Vest or like a Power Herb. I'm really, really nervous about that if I'm you.
Yeah, something
There's
like
good
Lian
things
Mega
for this team.
also really benefits from
Yeah,
having a throat spray or a choice specs, but again, you're probably locked into boots, especially if him on top is the best hazard removal sending out there.
yeah. Let me offer some thoughts as well. Where one, I think a lot of your Mons. Here's your goals that I think we need to accomplish. One, we need better hazard control. It's looking abysmal, and I think that's super important. The second is your highest special attack stat is on Yan Mega, which I just am not. I just don't believe in that Mon's ability to wall break for you. I don't believe in it. Other people may feel differently. I do not. And I think where you need to alleviate that is, I think Garchomp is a good Pokemon. I think Arcanine Hisui is a good Pokemon. Having them both on the same roster feels slightly redundant to me. Even though Garchomp can do different things than Arcanine, I think they fill a kind of similar niche in your team compared to your other guys. And I think there would be much better options for you to have other than this Arcanine. Now, if it's a Mon you really love, keep it around. I mean, hey, don't let me say anything otherwise. But I definitely think potentially picking up a strong special attacker would go a long way. You don't even have a fairy type, which is a huge red flag for me. You could pick up like a Clefable instead. Again, I'm not saying that's the best possible option for your team, but it would definitely be a start. Not having a fairy type is really, really disconcerting for me. So that's something I would suggest looking into. There are fairy types left on the board. And then these bottom mons, you can get a lot of value elsewhere. I think it's a little too focused on the sand aspect, which I can respect, but it makes your flexibility incredibly small. And flexibility in draft matters a lot more than other things in more like OU or doubles. So
I think you could get a lot of points out of this team if you drop that Tyranitar. It's a Mon who's honestly has pretty atrocious typing with a lot of weaknesses, and the team around him honestly does nothing to combat that. A lot of fighting weeks, a lot of water weeks, stuff like that. So I think you could get a lot of upgrades by dropping that slot. If you wanted to hang on to that sand, that's fine. But if you're going to go that route, I would definitely very much drop that Arcanine slot and look there.
sounds good.
Yeah, sounds good. Next up, we have Untitled Ducklet Team. Looking pretty sharp. Two-time reigning champ in King's Court. 2 times in a row, Raging
Long
Bolt.
deck.
long neck. So
There he is.
he's standing proud. Great history, and hopefully looking to make a three-peat, maybe. What are your thoughts looking at this team initially, Vaughn?
So this team has two mods that I have a soft spot for. One is Raging Bolt, which I'm using in the league that Cards and I are playing in right now. That's not King's Court, and I had a lot of success with him. The other is Corviknight, which I drafted on my first ever draft team. I also think you drafted in season 1, which might have been your first draft league, Cards. I'm not
I
sure.
did. Yeah, so
Yeah. So I've got a soft spot for it. I think it's actually kind of a controversial mod because some people love it, some people hate it.
I'm a big
But at the
fan.
end of the day, I look at your team and I see a defensive core of Corviknight and Alomomola, and other than the fact that electric type exists, that's pretty annoying to break through. So I think those mods defensively can carry a lot of weight, and I also think that less experienced players really struggle to break those mods. But I think there's a lot of problems here, and I want to start with that because I actually think this team has some legs with this Raging Bolt plus defensive core. So one thing, you have no stealth rocks. That is unacceptable for me in
Yeah,
Gen 9. I think you
that-
need someone that can click a stealth rock.
That
move.
is not great.
Furthermore, you don't have a rapid spinner, which is death. You have Ogre. First of all, you have Ogrefon Hearthflame, which we'll get to that. But that guy's taking 25 from rocks every time, and hazard stacking is one of the best ways to deal with your defensive core. So that's where I'm going to start. Another thing that I'm thinking of is I see this team lacks a grounded poison type, which I also think is very important because you don't have hazard removal. I see this team. If I am any team, I don't know you Cards. I am clicking spikes and then I'm clicking T spikes and then I'm switching around for like 20 turns and I win. That's my prerogative because I'm clicking Volt Switch for free on this whole team because your
Yeah,
defensive
I
core
mean-
can't handle it, and then I spike you to death.
The defensive core is very passive. It does invite a lot of setups, but I will say I like the Ditto here because you have some pretty passive walls in the Corviknight and the Alomomola. The Corviknight, I will say I very much agree. A rapid spinner seems pretty necessary. Like, yes, Corviknight can defog, but I honestly think that's where a lot of the struggles with this mon start to pop up when you force it into a defog
Yes.
roll every time. And it
Yes.
just becomes so much better if you're not forced to run defog every
Yeah.
week.
Yep, I agree. If I have to play around like Braybird, IDEF, BP, instead of just being like defog, roost, U-turn, it changes a lot. I guess you do you get defog on Conkeldurr?
You
I mean
do,
I think the mod
but,
doesn't.
like-
Okay, I think the mod doesn't fit though. I don't like it in this team personally. So
Yeah,
you're not bringing it to defog, so that doesn't count. I think realistically you could reshape almost everything past your Alomomola and really put together like a real championship team. I think for your typing as well, I think Hearthflame, just swap it out for Wellspring. I think
Wellspring
you
is
should change
up.
your. Yeah,
Oh,
they're the
wow.
same points. Wellspring is 50 times better.
yeah, I
Sorry.
think that would just be way better, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that's a great start. You also don't get blown up by rocks. Your speed tiers, again, I'm saying this out of love, I think they're really bad. I think you have only one mod above 100 speed, which is really hard, and it's also your most like frail mod typing wise in Hearthflame. So I think you should potentially look at when you're replacing some of your lower tier mods, picking up something that can go faster and give you some versatility. So something that screams out to me for that is like a Noivern. You could be looking at that, for example. And then I think with your defensive core, this is my number one suggestion. You need a good ground type. Please, anything. I don't care what it is. I think Hippowdon is available. There's really good value ground types in Mudsdale
Yeah,
and Pilot
great
Swine.
news.
Can't
There's
find the points.
A lot of squires that you can drop
Yeah.
potentially the Scyther slot for. Like, my suggestion would be Mudsdale. That also gives you more rocks.
Yes.
Which is a
Oh,
very,
yeah,
very much
true.
a necessity.
That's a great suggestion, actually. And also, Terra fighting Mudsdale with body press and stamina is nothing to sneeze at. And it would give him some physical bulk that isn't tied to things that get one shot by electric moves. So, any other things stick out to you? I think the biggest thing for me is definitely the speed tiers
Yeah.
and no ground type to help Corviknight and Alomomola not die, because you pretty much have to get into Bolt to tank a electric type, and like that's not Bolt's job.
That's not great. That's not where you want like your Monarch to be.
Yeah,
Holding together your
save my
defensive block.
Corviknight Raging Bolt fast.
Yeah, a
Not his
Lomomola
job.
Corviknight with no ground type is kind of a death sentence. So that would be my number one for sure. Speed tiers don't help, but you know that'd probably be my second thing I'd look at. Anyways, now we get into the single digits with Rotom Washed here. Bit of a rain team. Didn't really start out as one, but picking up that Politoed later on in the draft to enable this Walking Wake in this Urshifu Rapid Strike. So going to be very dangerous breakers. If you don't have a water immunity or a strong Dragon Resist, going to be very, very tough to switch into those two. Even the Zapdos in rain, nothing to scoff at. Can drop down Thunders, drop down Hurricanes. So some high wall breaking potential to any water weak teams there.
I'm gonna sound like a broken record here. Cards, show me the rapid spinner on this team.
Well, that would be pretty hard, Vaughn, because guess what?
Cards,
He doesn't exist.
cards, chat, show me the stealth rocker on this team.
Deoxys
Oh.
Defense, and
Okay.
that's where the list ends.
Does he actually get rocks?
I think he does.
Okay, I'm gonna check real quickly before.
Can we get a fact check?
Either way, I don't even think it gets rocks. Can I
Does
be
it
honest?
really? Does it only
No,
get
it doesn't.
spikes? Ooh, okay.
It
does.
no, it does. It does. It gets both. No, I
Okay.
lied.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna reiterate what I said earlier though. I don't like more. I want more than one rocker. The fact that you only have like one hazard that's not sticky webs, and I don't really like the Galvantula on the team anyway. I'm not a fan of. So things I do like, I always like talking about that first. This Zapdos mon is a beast, and even though I'm a little nervous about Deoxys Defense being your big wall, it will always live something. Like you can make it fit. So I actually don't mind it as much. So I really love that. I like Urshifu Rapid Strike as a Pokemon. However, I think that this being like a whack rain team makes it super one-dimensional. And yeah, it can hit hard with the Walking Wake and the Urshifu, but Urshifu it just feels like icing on the cake for Urshifu. And then if I'm being honest, Walking Wake fits better in Sun anyway. So one thing I would suggest, and a lot of times people are like very tied to their Monarch, so take this with a grain of salt. But the first thing I actually suggest with this team is, and it's hard because rain teams are always tied to the rain, but I actually don't love the rain as much. If you want to keep the rain, my genuine suggestion is dropping Urshifu Rapid Strike and picking up something like Terapagos. It immediately
I believe... No, Great Tusk is not. Terapagos is open, yeah.
Yeah, it immediately helps his holes and roll compression while still giving him a cleaner or a sweeper or a spinner or a stealth rocker. And I just I don't know, but then you don't have your Shifu. But here's where I'm at. If you want to go rain, just take the mask off and go rain, man. Like just pick up a Basculegion or something, because I feel like none of these mods are like rain mods. If you're really convinced that rain is the way to go, which is one-dimensional, but why not? Like then really commit to it. I think having a more diverse supporting cast around the Galvantula, the Slacking, the Whimsicott Prankster I can kind of get behind, but I feel like if you want the rain team, just go the rain team. But it feels like it's non-committal either way, and so it has a lot of like exploitable aspects of the team. What do you think?
I think not having something like a Fortress here is a really big deal. My main issue is it's really a Politoed issue. Well, I mean, it's also a team issue because this team really struggles to make progress outside of rain. So you really won't rain up all the time, which means your Politoed probably wants Damp Rock. But if your Politoed has Damp Rock, it's getting hit by Spikes and Stealth Rocks, which means it's getting chipped down instantly, which means you want to run Boots, but again, you don't want Boots because you need the rain up.
Yeah.
And all these issues could be somewhat alleviated if you had any decent type of hazard removal. at all. So I do agree. I like the Zarude here, but stuff like the Galvantula and maybe even the Whimsicott could be much more rain oriented, and it feels like this team would have a better direction.
Yes, I feel similarly.
And that just about sums up our thoughts on this team. Going on to top 8, here we have the one and only Palossand Penitentiary. The what's this guy's name? Palafin. The Palafin team.
Palafin Hero.
Palafin
Yo,
Hero.
how about you talk about this team first? Because you had some thoughts on it when we were talking before.
I will talk about this team. I think, well, first of all, big Palafin fan, and it's fantastic with Lando here. They have great synergy with each other, able to switch in for each other well, and I just love the two. It's also a pivot into Palafin, which is always great. There's also a pretty diverse defensive cast here, especially between that Wo-Chien and that Skeledirge there. Again, able to switch into each other very well. And yeah, some pretty good speed tiers. My problems with this team start to come in with the pace that it plays at, and really Hitmonchan down there at the bottom. Because if you will notice, man, how many times have you said this? Hazard removal is really important, okay? And right now, your only Rapid Spin is Hitmonchan, which is maybe doable. The Mon is bad.
No.
The Mon is bad.
Yeah,
the Mon is
go.
pretty terrible.
Just
right?
say what you want to say, bro.
And especially at a team that is going to be playing these longer games like this, right? You have a big defensive core. You're going to be swapping in a lot. You want those hazards gone, and you don't want to be forced to run boots on your whole team. And just forcing Hitmonchan to come out there and spin is just not going to work. Your Monarch also very much appreciates hazards being gone, and it just feels like that's like the major weakness of this team that honestly does have a lot of strength, but that is the one thing holding it back in my mind.
Yeah, I think you misspoke also because you were talking about Hitmonchan, then he said good speed tiers, but his fastest mon, he has Kilowattrel, I guess. But like that's it.
That's kind of it.
That's it. I think that could improve a bit as well. So here's my thoughts on this team because I actually had this team a bit higher rated than Cards, and I like went back and forth a little bit on some teams. I actually like this team a bit more than he does. But if you had more speed, I think it'd be really good. I know that's funny because I kind of play into the bit like, oh, if my team's not fast, I don't want to play it. But I think there's a lot of validity in having multiple mods 100 plus. I think it helps a lot. So I think Kilowattrel and Slowbro Galar are actually really good pickups for your team. I think they fit really well. I love both of these options, and I wouldn't change these. Your only stealth rocker is Landorus. I always like to keep the same kind of checks for each team because it shows how I approach it. And your hazard game kind of stinks, but both in spinning and setting them. So that's something you could really look at because all of a sudden when you have a choice banded Jet Punch and you have to swap into it and your guy doesn't have boots, you're only tanking like maybe 3 of those at most if you're full defensive on mons with like a berry. So the other thing I don't like is I think your team is actually too bulky. I think it's too defensive. Your Palafin needs help making progress, and you don't really have a good special attacker outside of Kilowattrel. I don't think that Kilowattrel can solo take on this burden, so I actually think this Skeledirge needs to go. I don't like the Skeledirge for the rest of this team. I'm actually not a fan of it. So I understand it provides you that special attacking, but I think without a Terra type, or like a Terra option, I'm not super afraid of this thing. And I think you have so many defensive options in your lower tiers that do just fine that this needs to be something that's going to hit harder and can also smooth out your speed tiers as you get into the higher echelons of speed. One thing I'm going to immediately point you at is Latios, which is up. I think it would be really, really kind of that idea that we're going for with a bit faster and can hit hard specially. It gives you a lot of ice weakness. So if that makes you nervous, you could draft Skeledirge, or you could drop it and then something else, and I'm sure there are plenty of fine fire types that you could find if that's something you're concerned about. But I definitely think your Palafin needs more help on the offensive side. I'm a bit concerned about. I look at Florges, Gudra, Wo-Chien, and Skeledirge, and there's a lot of overlapping defensive profiling and like what those mons are gonna do. So that's my 2 cents. And I do think this team has good pieces, though. I just think every one of these pieces on the same team doesn't work. Looks like I'm looking at like a puzzle box where there's 6 corners and no edge other pieces, if that makes sense. Just stepping on their toes a little bit, and
That makes sense to
Palafin needs
me.
some special
Kinda.
breakers. It's like you know what I mean.
know,
Also,
I do kind of know what you mean, though.
he's got Bayleaf as a
OG.
jester, so goat status.
W.
But let's just move on. I yapped a
Yeah,
lot about this one.
we've set our piece on this team. Coming on here at number 7, we have Metal Face Terrorist. Coming in pretty hot, I would say, with D-Speed, Samurott, and Glamora. Maybe the best top 3 that we've seen so far out of every
So
team.
far, yeah.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on how he finished out this draft?
Okay. Yeah, so you and I this was the other team we disagreed on. I think, look, I know you, Harrison Tendies. I'm telling it how it is. Every single Pokemon you drafted after Screamtail is terrible. I'm sorry. Like, Talonflame is fine on teams. Lovekicks is fine on teams. Like, they're all, like, okay, but they don't work with this team in my head. I don't like it. So, I will say the one thing I think you should probably keep is Bramblegast, because I think you need the threat of a spin blocker.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
if we look at your stats, your highest physical attacker is Bramblegast, and your highest special attacker is Glamora. So if you want both of them, and every week you're gonna lead Glamora and Hazard Set and Suicide Lead and die, that's fine. But like, how many hazards do you need? You have Dio and Hammerot. Like, you know what I think you understand what I'm getting at here. So my thing is, I think you need more like good offense. Stuff that can really break, and those low tiers need to be reimagined, and that's where Cards and I did agree on. I think this team, if it has better low tiers and potentially something that's not a Glamora, because I don't really like it on this team, but others may, I think it shoots up to top 3. One thing I want to suggest, I always like kind of giving like specific examples. I think Gallade could actually fit very nicely into your team as like a lower tier medium speed, because you've got a lot of speed already with Screamtail and Dio. Like, guy that's gonna hit hard. When you have a lot of hazards and a dude that's punching buttons, like Gallade is pretty slept on. I don't think it's been drafted in our league before.
Yeah, it recently got buffed into that night tier. I think it. I mean, if we're keeping Bramblevest,
it's good.
But even if you just slot into that Lord tier, that thing does a lot of damage.
Yes, do not fuck with Sharpness Gallade, okay? So those are my thoughts there. I think your hazard game is great, and you do need the spinner and Bramblegast, especially if I'm yelling at you to drop Talonflame for something that hits a bit harder. But what do you think, Cards?
Yeah, I think my main issue is looking at that Ambipom slot. 8 points, and it doesn't really feel like it's getting you a lot there. Some of its main draw is gonna be that high speed and that strong fake out.
You just don't need it.
But you just don't need it. I mean, look at your speed tiers, man.
Yeah, it's like too much.
Speed, Screamtail. You
need other stats. You need other stats.
Yeah, you need other stats. You're pretty committed to terroring low kicks on this team, which means like you already have some of the strongest priority in the game. I don't see any reason for Ambipom to be on this team at all.
Yeah.
And that's where I would either look to get something with like maybe more of a defensive backbone, or just
we need a bulky
guy.
Get my boy Registeel or something, man.
And
like let's patch up our
maybe
holes.
That Talonflame could be, like Vaughn said, a strong wall breaker, because right now we're really dependent on the hazard game to get us there.
It's insane. I don't know, an Infernape.
If you're against like a team that's good in the spikes, like a Magic Card core or something, it's good.
It's over. It's over.
Yeah. So that's where I would start there. Ambipom, I think for sure has to go. Talonflame could probably definitely also go too.
And just drop the bug. Just drop the bug. Sorry.
It's
sorry.
bug
There's
time.
Vivillon. I'm sorry. It's gotta go, bro. You can keep the Bramble though. I like it for spinning and spin
I
blocking.
do like. I do really like
But
Bramblegast, but yeah,
yeah,
some
and I
things to
think
work on.
something could fit better than Glamora, unless you want to play Deoxys like it's always gonna sit in the back and like sweep. Um, but like I don't know. I don't know how. I mean, obviously you'd switch up your team a lot, but like you can't tell me something like a Caesar or an Ursaluna Blood Moon. I mean, those are
And
very different ones, but like a
Ursaluna Blood
Steel.
Moon would
Yeah.
be great here. I will say.
Yeah, that's what
That's
I'm
like the
saying.
wall breaker.
That's what I'm saying. It's nice because you can eat some physical hits with it as well. It gives you some nice bulk. You can swap into like the Volt switches that eat your team alive right now. You have no ground type for it either. Um, I don't know, something to consider. Hey,
Yeah, there you
that's all I
have
gotta
it.
say about that.
That's all I gotta say too. So let's just march right on. Coming in at number 6, we have the one and only Greedy Gliscors. Also, I mean, we're getting into some really good top 3s here. Greninja,
Yeah.
Iron Hands, Iron Moth. Maybe the best out of any team.
No,
Really?
no,
Okay.
no,
Well,
no, no.
okay. Not number 1 might
I'm
be a little better, but
I'm you know how much I love Fat
you
Mike,
do love
and
Fat Mike.
you know I'm the number one Protean Mon stan minus the third one.
We don't talk
But
about
but I don't think Iron Moth deserves the same props as the other two. Here's where I'm gonna start with this team. And no, I do not count Masquerain and Mesprit. I'm clicking Earthquake on your team and you're losing the game. I'm sorry. That's just
This
how
is
it is.
pretty true.
I think the immediate thing that I consider, first of all, this Iron Moth. We're gonna start there. I love Iron Hands and Greninja Core. I would never change this. It's one of the scariest combos I think you could literally draft on our board. For the price it's at too is insane. But then you have a Mon that all it exists is to hit hard specially, right? That's pretty much all it does. I mean, it can. Okay, I'm not actually gonna argue. That's all it does. I don't care. You could run other stuff.
Yeah,
It's all it does.
there's a T-Spike set.
So yeah. So you already
alright.
have Greninja that does that really well. Like literally everything Iron Moth can do, Greninja can do pretty much better, in my opinion. So it doesn't give you much. And if you want a special attacker there, why are you getting a special attacker that's 4x weak to ground? Especially if you have a Haxorus, which, let's be honest, is going to be Terra Steel for Ice and Fairy. And then, once again, I'm clicking Earthquake on this thing. So I really don't like the Iron Moth in this fit. And I also don't like Superior as a combination of that.
Yeah, I think before it was dropped, it was a Hydrapple, which is much bulkier, would have helped a lot with that Earthquake problem. Be sure.
Yeah. So I want to give some suggestions. So one thing that sticks out immediately is I actually understand why you want a Grass type. And I also understand wanting like Fire Stab and a grounded poison. Okay, I understand all of these things, but I think they're better put in other spots. I think you have some really great picks in the lower tiers. I think Mesprit for the points in our league is actually, I think it's underpointed considering how expensive everything is. Like this mon is great, and also Donphan, great pickup. However, let's real quick, I'm going to throw out some potential options. Already, I love your team more if this Iron Moth, first of all, you don't have a Steel type. Caesar immediately sticks out once again. But if you want to maybe stick with that Grass type, let's get rid of the Superior and the Iron Moth, and Ogerpon Grass is available, which is a fantastic option for you because it gives you spike access, and also it gives you just a Grass type that's giving you the speed tier that you still want. I would suggest Rillaboom, but it kind of makes your Donphan a little weaker, so maybe not. And then you can pick up a really easy 2-for-1 because you don't really have a grounded poison anymore, and then you could also get a really solid poison in either Muck Alola or Pheasantipity. And then if you get Pheasantipity, you have a fairy type that lets you change around the Mimikyu, which I don't hate Mimikyu, but it just all of a sudden your flexibility opens up a lot more. I think too many of your Mons I can just click Earthquake on or not really get concerned about. So that's where I was considering myself. Like the Grass type could be a lot better. I think opening up your second Duke slot to something that doesn't die to an Earth move is really good when its job is already kind of covered by Greninja. And I think this Water Fire Grass core doesn't matter as much as it needs to. And if it really does matter, I would pick up something valuable down the road to fill out that fantasy regardless, like a Fire type. So any other thoughts on that, Cards?
Yeah, I definitely feel like if you don't remove this Iron Moth, there's always going to be like some issue sticking out with this team. Like there's no steel type. It's pretty earth weak, and you can like cover one of those things. But if you do, another pretty glaring issue pops up. Which is like fine if you like want to take that sacrifice to play with Moth, because it is a Mon with some high, like I think it has some pretty high strengths, but it does open up a lot of holes, like you said. I don't love Haxorus, especially don't love like it paired with like Dawnfan and Superior, all these Ice Weak guys. But I understand it. It is a pretty good, like you're looking for a high pointed Terra sweeper with that one, so I understand why it's there. But I mean, the core of Greninja Iron Hands is really good, so there's some good points on this team. And yeah, now we're cracking into the top 5 here, so really getting in the upper echelon here with Crafty Scrafties, the one and only. What are your thoughts on this team, Vaughn?
So now we're with a team that I think the top 3 could be argued as like one of the best trios. This top 3 is I mean, in my notes I just write sexiest top 3 beautiful angels. From my notes. Wow, I mean, okay, it's so good, and then the rest is really not good in my opinion. I don't like the rest of the team as much. I actually do like Gardevoir though. I actually think Gardevoir does kind of fit the team, and it gives them some flexibility in terms of like, it's hard to know what a Gardevoir is going to do to you when you're loading into the game, which I like because it needed a fairy and it had some really strong walls and pivots established early. So I'm never worried about like Gardevoir finding a spot to bring. But I think there's some other issues with this team, and I think it starts with everything after the Gardevoir. I really am not a fan of the steel types on your team. I understand that you need a spinner, okay? But Skarmory doesn't, like for Fortress, right? Skarmory, what does Skarmory do for you that Tinglu really isn't? So you kind of drafted for like a steel type that also can hazard set, but like you have a steel type and you have the best, probably the best hazard setter. Yeah, the GOAT. Okay, let's be clear. So I think realistically, I would drop both your steel types, which sounds crazy, but hear me out. I think your speed tiers are a little lopsided. I think you need more than just Dragapult to be a fast fella, and I don't count on burden procking. So one thing I would potentially suggest is, if you want to keep one of them, you can. Like, trust me, you can keep one of them, but if you drop both, I would pick up a Cyclizar and like a Registeel and replace it with that. But definitely you always want a spinner, which is why I'm suggesting that. Definitely drop one of your steals. Drafting Scrafty, W, okay? You draft the name team, I won't ever tell you to drop that guy. That's goated.
He's
W,
your goat.
W man.
Gotta ride or die with Scrafty. There's just no way.
But I just think your steel types just don't do anything for your team. That's my biggest problem with it. Your top 3 are so wonderful. Like, you need mons that are making progress and getting it done, which is why I liked Gardevoir. And honestly, kind of Scrafty, but I just don't like anything else. So I'm curious what you think about the card.
I think this team just needs like a strong button clicker.
Yeah,
it just needs someone to come in and swing and take one or two guys down with them. Because your Scrafty is like playing for like a sweep most of the time as your Terra captain, and again, you're all great at making progress like slowly through chip damage with stuff like Dragapult and Rotom-Wash and Tinglu. But something needs to come in and just start messing stuff up. So I would probably look at, like you said, one of those 2 steel slots there, because yeah, it just doesn't have enough of a raw power value for me just yet.
I agree. I think you have to get rid of more of your passive ones. I would also potentially think of getting rid of Grafaiai. If you're nervous about your grounded poison, just like grab like a Toxtricity or something. Like just do things that do some more damage.
Yeah, that's a great wall breaker there.
when your second and third round picks are defensive, like I want to see stuff in your mid tiers. Like I want to see stuff like Entei coming out. I want to see stuff like Reggie Drago coming out. Like, I want to see guys that are clicking buttons, okay? Because you got some goated hazards, and you don't really need too much else. Like, also, I don't really know what your Drifloom is giving you. It's giving you defog, I guess, but otherwise, you already have a spin blocker in literally Dragapult, which is a fine spin blocker. I don't know. I think there's a lot of redundancy in your Squires and your steals. So just look at that, and I think this team's got a lot of potential. I like it overall for sure.
And with that, let's move on to our number 4 slot, 2 Totodiles. Coming in hot, very strong wall breakers, and also some pretty strong sweepers with that Blastoise and that Roaring Moon. Generally, I mean, pretty flexible team, with the exception of like the top 2 maybe, but
yeah.
I definitely like. There's some really great pieces here.
There are some good pieces, and I like. I mean, the hazard control is almost too good, which is stupid to say, but it's like almost too good. And another thing I like is lots of Stealth Rock options. So I'm gonna make sure I make a point of that before I move on. I think the low tier mons are great. He has Tink, Blastoise, Mismagius, a Tauros
These are
variant,
fantastic,
and Tatsu. They're all great. However, my problem lies with his Monarch. I don't think the Monarch is doing what you need it to do. Sure, it's a wall breaking, but I think pairing something with Roaring Moon that can punish like a speed creep and hit hard is important, and you don't really need the flying typing with double levitate. So here's what my thoughts are. So put the fries in the bag. First thing that comes to my mind is Meowscarada, but I understand. Boo, Meowscarada Merchant. So here's the fun option that I think would be Heat, but would require you to maybe change some of your lower tiers because you already have 3 waters. Hear me out, cards. Imagine you could change out some of those lower waters, maybe like 1 or 2 of them, and then you look at this team with an Iron Bundle on it instead of a Landorus.
That, man,
hear me out.
Feels pretty great. Like
hear me out.
I think one of my main issues is that it feels really hard to win the game if Roaring Moon doesn't have a great matchup.
Yeah,
and
because he's
Landorus doesn't really help you with like closing out games. Iron Bundle certainly does. That guy's one of the best end game cleaners that we have. So that would definitely help in that regard. Might be a little too much water typing, like you said. Drop one of these guys. Probably not Blastoise. I mean, I'm a Blastoise fan.
My thoughts, if you liked it, was you die to fighting moves. So you would drop. My thought was you drop Tatsugiri and Tauros, and you pick up a fighting resist, like a poison, because he doesn't have one. You definitely get like a value poison type, and then you can still pair it with like a break, because like I mentioned this earlier, the low tier physical guys are way better than the low tier special guys. It's way easier to get value out of a little newbie fella in the lower tiers that hits hard.
Yeah, there's so many low tiers that, I mean, they are great. Not great at much else, but they're great at coming in and dropping big physical bombs.
Yeah, so that's where my biggest concerns lie, which is like if I have a good fighting type, which I guess Lando does give you that resist to, but I would be more concerned about giving yourself another way to win the game. And like Shell Smash Blastoise is solid. Like I'm using that right now in my other league, but he doesn't do a lot of damage. Like even Shell Smash, like if someone's bulky enough, like he's not breaking through that. And you have already like Mismagius as a really solid like secondary special attacker. So I just really think getting a really good poison grounded typing that resists like a Pheasantipity, I think would be great on this team. And then an Iron Bundle instead, and then all of a sudden I'm scaring down an Iron Bundle treads like covering each other except for fighting. Lots of fast and slow pivots and really good hazard control. I feel really nervous when I have to like load up into this team and win a match against them.
with that, let's take a peek into the third best team, power ranked, top 3. Who will be? It's Cooking Yanmas! Yeah, I mean, not much to say other than this team just feels solid all around. It feels, I mean, every slot just feels like they complement each other well. Great Tusk and Amorous, great core, pairs really well with this Thunderous pickup too. I like that a lot. You know, it's got great speed tiers, it's got good hazard control, it has some sweepers also. I mean, this team does it all.
I agree. I'll continue with the things I like. U-turn Cinderace, U-turn Serena, U-turn Uxie, flip turn Empoleon, Volt Switch, U-turn Thunderous. This team, when you play against it, is going to dictate the pace. You also have a great defensive core with Tusk, Serena, Empoleon, and Uxie. Like, every one of your defensive mons having a pivoting move is really, really good. So, the speed tiers are also something I like, which I haven't said too much. And I really like the fact that I think that Dean got 2 of the biggest steals of the draft in Uxie and Revavroom. For the points they are in our league, I think they are so good, especially Uxie. I have Uxie on my team right now in another league, and the Mon feels wonderful. It's so good for its points. It just, any Mon that you need to check defensively, you can just build it to do that. It's so great. And I'd be remiss, though, to say something I don't like, which is a lot of your guys super duper need boots, like really badly. And the thing that I want to mention with that is a lot of times when you need so many boots, it's really good to have a great knockoff switch, which you have in Tusk, but keep in mind you could get pressured on Tusk really fast if he's the only spinner you bring that week, because if I get up Stealth Rocks on any of your guys and I've gotten knockoff on like a lot of your top tiers, they're really hurting. Like, it's going to make a lot of progress on you. I'm not obviously saying it's not play aroundable, but like that's something a team would definitely look for against this team. Anything else you want to add, Cards?
Yeah, I mean, Great Tusk, it does, that's its greatest strength is that it does so much, but that can also be turned into a weakness again because it's so easy to overload it in the team builder. So, I mean, just make sure you don't put too much like stress on it from week to week. It can be easy to give it too many jobs, and then it doesn't really fulfill any of them, right? Because it's just being asked too much. I also don't really like this Oricorio slot, but I understand why it's probably there. You just want like a special Quiver Dancer, right? So that's fine. I'm just not a big fan of the Mon in general, but you know, it's a Terra Captain. It does its job.
I do think it's cute that he kind of grabs it for coverage because you don't need to run Terra Blast because you have
Yeah,
Revelation
you can
Dance.
just
I do think
Terra
that's
into
really
anything.
cute. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know. What does the Mon do? I couldn't say, but hey, it's looking cute, and
It's
I like this
dancing
wrap.
is what it does.
It's
Look at
dancing.
him.
So yeah, solid. Hey, I like it. Good work, Dean.
Great draft though. And next up, we have the one and only gambler of King's Court, Chinchino's Casino. This team looking pretty scary. Again, great top 3 core. Absolutely love this. And also some pretty high value picks later on. How are you feeling about this one?
Okay, so I obviously have this at number 2, but I actually have a big problem with this team, and it sounds like another one, but I'm pressing Earthquake. Okay? So the reason I'm mentioning that is because as a guy who just won a season where I felt like I had to bring one of my squires every week to fit my defensive profile, I don't want you to be relying on I need Orthworm every week or I need Rotom every week. That just feels bad. Okay? So let's talk about that before I go on, because I think this team has a lot of good parts to it. But I think if you fix it, it's the best team or one of the best teams. So one thing I don't really like on this team that fits it is Incineroar. It doesn't really fit a role for like a dark like attacker. Like you already have Darkrai, like so he's not there for offense, but you don't really need him for defense. Or if you do, you want him, like if you want the typing, like why get this guy when you're already so Earthquake weak? So one thing I would suggest is just pick up Moltres, because I'm clicking Earthquake on your first 5 picks and they're hurting a lot. They're either getting 50% HP'd or they're getting like 80 plus. So I think Moltres would be sick. Flame Body is awesome. It's still a pivot that can Will-O-Wisp because you're kind of drafting it for its defensive options. When I look at this team, you have Stab Fighting already in the Duck. You don't need to get any better at that. So like the close combat coverage, like I don't really mind. And then also it gives you a ground immunity. And then the other thing I'm looking at is like the Amoonguss and the Rotom Mow. Okay, so look, Amoonguss, dope mon. You already have a grounded poison, and you have 2 grass types. So technically a better mon than Rotom Mow, but I actually like Rotom Mow for this team more. It gives the electric and it gives levitate. Now all of a sudden, instead of being really like ground weak, you have 2 guys that are gonna levitate. You're probably dropping Earthworm with my suggestions here, but all of a sudden your profile looks like really, really scary. And then all you would really like, you don't need the double steal with Metagross and Earthworm. Like right now I look at your team and I'm just like rotating fast off of Volt Switch and clicking like Specs Thunderbolt. Like what if you just grabbed one of those really low value like Earth types, since I feel like the Earthworm got picked up for Earth Eater and Hazards. But then like what if you just grabbed like a Mudsdale or something? That's what comes to mind. And then the last thing is like I think you want another Mon that's kind of fast. Whichever one you want most, like there's some options out there. I won't tell you which one to get, but I think other than Darkrai, you don't really have anything that moves quickly, which I think is very important because you look really slow and abusable otherwise. Like I have something Scarf the Darkrai, and it outspeeds Duck at +1, and I think that just cleans up everything. So those are my thoughts, Cards.
Yeah, I think there's a couple directions you could go with this team. Obviously, it's great already, but to really give it that extra edge, and I think they all stem from that Incineroar slot. You could, like you said, get a Moltres into that slot, and I think it would fit this team very well.
I think it looks so good. And then I think you need a ground type with the Moltres Duck.
Yeah, for sure. Another thing, an issue I have with this team is that your Terras aren't great. Neither of your lords want to Terra, which is fine if your lower tiers were great with Terra, like, but they just don't. Nothing really cares that much about Terra, and like normally you'd see like 2 strong Squires with lords that don't want to Terra, but your Squire slots are literally non-existent. Which I guess is the price you pay for going with like the highest points for your Force 4 picks. That's fine, but I think you could also drop your Incineroar and get either like a strong Lord with Terra that really wants to Terra, or 2 strong Squires who also really want to Terra, and then you can rotate between them. So that's where I would go with this team. I definitely think this Incineroar has to go, but you have a couple options of what you want to go from there. But
yeah, I agree. And then also having if you could find a fairy, this is the only draft I've seen where it's like, oh, it doesn't have a fairy and like it's not the end of the world. If you could find one, it could help. Like maybe there's a world where like the Terra, like a Terra Comfey isn't like the worst thing I've ever heard of. Like a Terra Jolteon, not a fairy obviously, but kind of fits what we're talking about. I think just something that fixes the redundancy in your defensive typing, and then I don't really like the Earthworm as well, and then you can drop the Fletchinder for some extra points. Life moves on.
And with that, we are officially through all these teams, just leaving the #1 spot. Give it up for drumroll,
you gotta
please.
say it, Cards.
I'll say it. Say it on 3.
Okay.
Say it on 3. All right.
Okay.
3, 1, 2, 3. Morgrim Raw!
Okay. Good.
Yeah, Just had to get that.
We said it appropriately.
Yeah.
Well,
I'll
look,
let you take the lead on this since.
Are you sure? Like, I don't know if I.
Yeah, I
Oh.
think you have. I know you probably helped a little bit with the building of this one, so I'll let you take the lead because I think this
Okay,
shaped out very well.
So that the haters will say I'm biased, but if you guys in Clefable and Gengar divisions, if you want to compare the pick 2 players teams, you're gonna notice a lot of similarities, which is probably just a coincidence. So Gumi actually smurfed this harder than me because we had the exact same draft plan. Except for he somehow got Tornadus and then still got a good Steel type, which like an offensive one, which I didn't get to do because Grimella was a terrorist and picked up Metagross even though it was bad with his team and then dropped it. Now I can't get it. All good.
GG.
GG is right. So he has this Heatran Iron Valiant Core. For people who aren't familiar with what those mons do, they complement each other like literally perfectly. And then on top of that, he got Tornadus, which is probably the most flexible mon in the draft. That isn't like Dragapult, right? Like this mon could be a Monarch. I think it should be a Monarch, but that's beside the point. I think the Tornadus, these top 3 mons are so good because the Iron Val and the Heatran cover beautifully for each other, and then Tornadus just being such a valuable pick really can't be understated. I really love that he has options for Stealth Rocks. So it allows like his Krook to not need to Stealth Rock, but also his Heatran doesn't need to, depending on what needs to happen. And he has a great spinner and Tentacruel, which I think is a very important because also his Tentacruel isn't really going to be punished by the Earthquakes that are come his way because he has some really solid flying types. So those are the first things I want to point out. I have some ideas of things I want to suggest, but I'll let you talk the first cards.
Yeah, I think one of the main things that stick out with this team, first of all, there's like no real flaw in it. Normally when you see top ends that are really good, it can be common to see some holes as you go on, but I think literally everything drafted in this is like pretty quality. Maybe the one thing you could point out is like Lilligant, but I think that's also fine. And I just think top to bottom, this team complements each other well. It fills pretty much every potential box you would want, and yeah, I mean this is just terrifying to go up against in the builder. So yeah.
I've got one myself. I actually think it can get better, and I'm gonna throw out my suggestion because in my draft I got Samurai Hisui, and so I wanted a spin blocker. And so then when Gumi was drafting, he was like, okay, what's my spin blocker? And I was like, I don't know, pick a ghost type. Because I checked out because his team was already good enough. So I was like, whatever. But he doesn't really need a spin blocker because his team is less hazard focused. And I think that he can use a bit more bulk. And also he's kind of water weak on paper. He only has one real water resist. Other than Lilligant, which I think Lilligant actually has value here. But I think he should drop Golurk and pick up Belly Bolt.
Ooh,
I think it makes his team really hot.
be
I'll
pretty
be so
solid.
real. I think he's got. I think Stab. I mean, even like he has Terra points to spare as well, which is awesome. Like, there's just gonna be a week where Terra Electric, like Specs Belly Bolt is gonna blow up a team because he doesn't have that typing yet, and Belly Bolt doesn't even need a Terra to be good, so he can save it for his Tauros. And then it gives him a pivot, like a slow pivot, which he doesn't have, which I think is really important. Like, slow pivoting in his Iron Val off of an Electromorphosis charged Volt Switch is awesome. And it covers a weakness that this team and my team has, because I'll keep referencing mine because we have similar teams, is we don't have any recovery other than Regenerator. So I think Belly Bolt is a sick pickup here. Which I forgot to tell him, which I'll actually message him right now. So by the time the video drops, he'll have done it. Hey, are you here?
Wow, if you see any Belly Bolt pickups, you know what happened. But
That's facts. He's my sister team, so
Yeah.
I think that's a good team.
Gotta
and
look
that's
out.
really the only suggestion I have.
yeah, I mean, if you are potentially worried about, I mean, Belly Bolt, great offensively into water, great bulk pickup. I do like the Tauros, even though it does exacerbate the water problem. But yeah, I mean, not a lot of notes on this one. But unfortunately, I lied. We're missing one team.
Oh shit.
And the true secret final boss, alright? This guy may have drafted the best team, alright? But what if you just don't show up to the draft at all? And that's why at number 0, I have PDL
Hell yeah.
Sloppy Seconds with the undisputed best roster of all time because he didn't draft anything yet. And that's why
Goat
he's
alert.
my GOAT. GOAT alert! Yeah, that's facts. But, hey, shout out Nathan. He's my GOAT.
Shout out Nathan. And also as a reminder, like everything we're saying here is biased by our own experiences. And if you really like your team or you like a mon that we suggested like to not keep, like that's totally within your power to keep it. Just these are things that are coming from, we are at best slightly more experienced than you. It's not like we're just these all-seeing overlords. It's just from our own experience in draft. We've been doing it for about like a year now, I'd say, between the two of us. So just keep that in mind. And if you ever have any questions, like don't be afraid to ask any of the dudes in the upper division. Like most of us have been playing for at least a year or so, so we've got some experience. So like don't be afraid to just ping someone and like reach out and potentially make a new buddy. Because everyone is pretty helpful.
Yeah,
so,
I know a lot of, pretty much everyone in the upper division would love to just talk about whatever Pokemon related. So, you know, hit people up, you know, don't be shy. But that just about wraps up everything we have here to say today. Thank you very much if you've made it all the way to the end. We cracked the hour mark, clocking in at 1:06. So, bit of a longer one, but, you know, a lot to say today. A lot to say.
We're yapping, baby.
Yapping.
Good luck to everyone that's starting their season.
Yeah, good luck. Thank you very much to Vaughn, who came in today with a lot of analysis on these teams. With that, I will be signing off. Drop that like button, subscribe, yada yada.
To punch that like,
Hit that bell
awesome
right
content.
now.